All right, in Chapter 12, Lesson 4, we're going to continue this talk about physical activity, but we're really going to hit home the idea of making sure that we're taking precautions and being safe when we are active. Far too often when you're active, you're asked to stretch beforehand, wear proper clothing or shoes, and make sure that you're aware of any dangers that you might come in contact with. Well, if we're not careful, we can get hurt, and really simple things can cause some problems. So it's important to be aware of the different things that we're going to cover in this lesson. When it comes to safety first, a list of some pretty easy ones to be aware of are use the correct safety equipment for an activity. If it calls for a helmet, make sure you're using the right one. Make sure it's in good, proper working order. Pay attention to other people, objects, and the weather, especially Minnesota. We have hot and cold weather so routinely in different seasons of the year that we got to make sure that we have the right protection, whether it's from the sun or from the cold elements. Play or exercise at your skill level, know your limits. It's real easy to get all excited about doing an activity, maybe one that you've never done, and jump into too quickly before knowing what you're supposed to do. It'd be like jumping in a pool without ever knowing how to swim, but you jump in the deep end. I think we all know that we should probably start in the shallow end where we can touch the bottom and have control of where we are. Warm up before exercise and cool down afterward. That certainly could include some stretching or at least elevating your heart rate enough to get your muscles and the rest of your body prepared for the more vigorous activity that you might be heading toward. Stay within the areas designated for a given activity. One that comes to mind would be swimming in a lake where there's a designated swimming area. Certainly we wouldn't want to get away from that. Unfortunately, we hear about or read about in the news every year, every summer of a student, a child, somebody being hurt or killed or drowning in a situation where really if we would have followed the rules and probably supervised that person a little bit better, it might have been prevented. And of course, obey all rules and restrictions and practice good sportsmanship. One of the biggest threats to your safety could be other people, and it might be how you treat those people or how they perceive they're being treated. Like I said in the previous slide, that watching the weather is really, really important because the weather changes so dramatically in Minnesota. We can have nice fall days where once the sun goes down, the weather gets really, really chilly, and there's a lot of people who are doing bonfires and who are out doing things, maybe even just doing chores and doing work around the house, where you got to be aware of shifts in weather that can happen very quickly. And that could be rain, snow, sleet, ice, certainly running around, maybe even shooting hoops on the driveway becomes a little bit dangerous when there's ice and weather around. So keep in mind that the clothing we have should be protecting us against whatever it is we're doing. And this slide just gives you a pretty good overview of different types of layers that exist for the cold. There are some cold weather risks to be aware of, so we have some tips to help us in cold weather activities. Warm up and cool down even in the cold weather. Your muscles are more likely to be tight and stiff should you be out active in the winter, so it doesn't hurt to make sure that we are loose and we get a little stretch in and maybe elevate again that heart rate to prepare our bodies. Going to the right here in the purple, drink plenty of fluids. Cold air can lead to dehydration. We can get your mouth, throat, and nose can get very dry the more we are outside in the cold weather, and we want to be able to replace those fluids. Bottom left says cover your nose and mouth to prevent breathing cold, dry air. I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen, or maybe people who do run in the cold weather, and they'll wear like one of those either ventilators or it looks like a doctor's mask or a mask that you do when doing construction with drywall and whatnot around their throat and their nose and mouth, because then you're breathing a lot of the air back in around your mouth and nose, and it stays warm. If you have asthma, talk to your doctors before exercising outdoors in cold weather. Those bronchial tubes can kind of narrow up and get and restrict themselves in the cold weather, and certainly makes breathing much more difficult. Two of the biggest concerns we have with cold weather are frostbite and hypothermia. Frostbite is damage to the skin and tissues caused by extreme cold. The skin's going to become pale, hard, and numb, often kind of black, and really like a dark burn. And warm body, you need to warm the body part slowly and possibly seek medical help. So if you were to be stuck outside in the snow with your feet to your hands for a long period of time, you don't want to just go dump them in hot water or run them over, run hot water over them. You want to kind of do it slowly because we can damage the skin and those tissues and cells further by doing that way too quickly. Hypothermia is where our body temperature gets dangerously too low. Again, if somebody gets stuck outside, falls in water, does some sort of activity where they're outside in far too improper of clothing, it's a very big concern. And certainly we know people who are hunting, ice fishing, things like that, this is one that we shouldn't take lightly. It occurs because of extreme cold, submersion in cold water, windy conditions, like I mentioned. You're going to see drowsiness, weakness, confusion, breathing and heart rate slow down, followed by shock and heart failure. This requires emergency medical help, so make sure you call 911 if you can. And this very much could be coupled with frostbite. So you imagine somebody being outside way too long and stuck in a bad conditions. Maybe a car breaks down or something like that too, and one can kind of precede the other. And of course, we can't talk about cold weather risks without talking about the hot weather risks. In Minnesota, there are a lot of people who take good advantage of the warm weather when we have it to go out and do fun things. Heat exhaustion is a big concern. It's where physical stress on the body is caused by overheating, where your body is basically forced to work too hard and can't keep up with not only the activity but the heat. We see heavy sweating, clammy skin, dizziness, confusion, fainting, or you can just tell you've been in the sun way too long. And heat exhaustion and heat stroke are two different things, and we'll definitely talk about both, and there'll be a little video here in a second that will talk about it. You want to make sure you rest in a shady area, drink cold water, fan your skin, and seek medical help. If you can remove some layers, certainly you want to do that, but sometimes the perspiration and clothing would be a way of helping you cool down a little bit. Here's a little video that's going to describe the difference between heat exhaustion and heat stroke, which becomes kind of a fine line when somebody is outside and they're starting to not feel so good.
Heat exhaustion is something that can happen on any hot day when you're out exercising, particularly in young children. Heat stroke is when the body has an inability to actually rid itself of the excess heat on a hot day. So heat exhaustion is something that can be treated at home, but heat stroke is a medical emergency. So warning signs of heat exhaustion would be if your child is unable to stand up anymore, is sweating excessively, is feeling lightheaded or dizzy, or acting different. Treatment for heat exhaustion would be, first of all, to get them out of the sun so that they can cool off, and secondly, to make sure that they're well hydrated. That might be sports drinks on if there's been a lot of sweat and exercise, or just simply water. If you're looking at using a sports drink, it's important to look at the sugar content, because sports drinks that have more than 5 or 6% sugar can actually cause stomach cramps and prevent adequate hydration. So look for sports drinks with less sugar. So when heat exhaustion becomes heat stroke, it's a dangerous medical emergency. Signs of heat stroke would be a change in the level of consciousness, fainting, unable to stand up, talking funny. It can be sometimes difficult to notice in kids, especially if they're young children who can't talk. But it is a medical emergency, and if you're worried about any of those symptoms, you should go see a doctor immediately.
All right, and we all like to do things in the summer, but it's important that we are staying hydrated. I think most people, including adults, including myself, don't drink near enough water in those situations, and we really need to make sure we're staying away from energy drinks as well, because it could be real easy to be running around with friends at the lake, at the cabin, at the pool, whatever, and taking a couple energy drinks to kind of give you the pep you need to get through the day or the activity. Again, with hot weather risks, overexertion and heat stroke are a big concern, overworking the body. So you can imagine somebody doing chores outside or at football, soccer, any type of sporting practice outside in the heat where it's just way too much. There are new regulations in professional sports, especially football, because of some injuries and deaths that have occurred due to overexertion in high hot weather situations. And we certainly want to avoid heat stroke, which is a dangerous condition in which the body itself loses its ability to cool itself, like they said in the video. And it can cause sudden death. It's important to seek medical attention if the person is beyond just a little bit dizzy and worn out. Another concern is just sun and wind protection. Sun and wind can pose a hazard in both hot and cold weather situations, and it can lead to windburn, sunburn, skin cancer, and eye damage. Again, this doesn't have to have anything to do with temperature. If somebody's out in the snow and isn't adequately protected against the sun, all the white can reflect that the sun's energy and it still cause burns. We see that on people's face, especially while snowmobiling and ice fishing and things like that. And we, obviously don't want skin cancer and damage to our eyes. So make sure that you are wearing sunglasses, sunscreen, proper layers and clothing and things like that. As with any activity, there's always a risk for some minor injuries, and I think most people who have been active or been running around with friends or family have probably experienced something like this. Blisters being a big one, depending on the type of footwear I should say you're wearing. New shoes can often rub and wear on the feet in places that you wouldn't expect and can cause blisters. Muscle cramps if somebody's not adequately hydrated or the proper nutrition hasn't been eaten or part of their diet over the last 24 48 hours. Strains where we basically strain a ligament in next to a muscle from probably either just overexertion, moving wrong, or not properly warming up or cooling down. And tendonitis can be kind of a nagging injury of inflammation in a joint as a result of overwork and activity. For treating minor injuries, there is the Price procedure. Often you'll see it as RICE as well. P stands for protect the area with a bandage or splint to prevent further injury. Something that can be learned in first aid CPR with either Mr. Cross, Mr. Belka, or Mr. Sagan. Rest the muscle or joint for at least a day, kind of stay off it. Ice the affected area for 10 to 15 minutes at a time, 3 times a day for 2 days after the injury. Really is going to cut down the inflammation and ultimately going to cut down the pain and allow the healing process to start a little bit more quickly. Compress the affected area to reduce swelling. That swelling is really what's going to cause the pain, and it's your body really overreacting to the injury. And if we can cut that down, we can definitely prevent the person from experiencing pain. If you've ever rolled an ankle, you probably know what I'm talking about. And that ice, although maybe a little bit uncomfortable, does reduce that swelling. And then we want to elevate the injured area above the level of the heart to keep the swelling down, because it's going to make the blood vessels work a little bit harder to get that extra inflammation and swelling and fluids to that affected area, especially if we're talking about like an ankle or a foot or a knee, if it has to go uphill. And of course, any type of activity we have major injuries, and we don't have enough time to spend on all the different things that can happen. Certainly, first aid CPR will spend almost half the semester just talking about these type of injuries. But some that require immediate medical care include fractures or broken bones. Dislocations occur when a bone pops out of its normal position in a joint. We see finger dislocations, shoulder, ankle, knees, and some other places are a little bit harder to happen, but they do happen. And a concussion is certainly a big concern nowadays, especially in sports. It's an injury to the brain that can result in a severe headache, unconsciousness, or memory loss. And a lot of athletes are having multiple concussions, and they become easier and easier to happen after you have the first, second, third one. And it can be very dangerous to a person's brain and ultimately their health.